We are preparing to bring you Prime Minister's questions for the first time with a very, very lovely and brand new background that I've got behind me here. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you will see that I've got Boris Johnson on one side, who's over there, and I've also got Keir Starmer on the other side, who's over there. Or is it that way around? Yeah, it's that way around. Anyway, listen, here's the point. We here at Talk Radio are absolutely at the cutting edge of everything. What we are going to now do is a minute's silence for Captain Sir Tom Moore. Let's have a listen to Mr. Speaker.
Our respects to those who have lost their lives as a result of the COVID and their families and friends. Order. We now come to questions to the Prime Minister. I will first call the Prime Minister to answer the engagements question. I will then call Claire Anna to ask her supplementary. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Captain Sir Tom Moore, or Captain Tom as we all came to know him, dedicated his life to serving his country and others. His was a long life lived well, whether during his time defending our nation as an army officer, and last year bringing the country together through his incredible fundraising drive for the NHS that gave millions a chance to thank the extraordinary men and women of our NHS who protected us in this pandemic. As Captain Tom repeatedly reminded us, please remember tomorrow will be a good day. He inspired the very best in us all, and his legacy will continue to do so for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, we now all have the opportunity to show our appreciation for him and all that he stood for and believed in. That's why I encourage everyone to join in a national clap for Captain Tom and all those health workers for whom he raised money at 6 p.m. this evening. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Let's head over to Northern Ireland with Claire Hanna. Claire Hanna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly echo those words about Captain Tom, a decent and inspiring man. The SDLP warned for the last 5 years about the destabilising impact Brexit would have in Northern Ireland, though we take no pleasure in the disruption nor in the injury some feel to their British identity. The last few days have seen a rash and thankfully withdrawn decision by the European Commission, which was condemned by all parties here and both governments, and unfortunately followed by sporadic criminal behaviour and threats. Will the Prime Minister, in affirming the rule of law in Northern Ireland, to consider seriously the impact of their words and work together through the available structures to ensure that the new arrangements work for everybody in Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I certainly agree with the Honourable Lady that it was most regrettable that the EU should seem to cast doubt on the Good Friday Agreement, the principles of the peace process, by seeming to call for a border across the island of Ireland. And I can tell her that we will work to ensure that there are no such borders. We will respect the peace process and indeed no barriers down the Irish Sea, and that the principle of unfettered access across all parts of our United Kingdom is upheld.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I join the whole House in paying tribute to Captain Sir Tom Moore. who was indeed an inspiration to all of us and a beacon of light at a time of darkness and a true gentleman. I'm sure my right honourable friend is aware that my 10-minute rule bill would increase the maximum penalty for death by dangerous driving to life imprisonment. The policy and the bill have cross-party support. The policy has government support, the bill does not. The government says it will introduce the policy in its sentencing bill, of which we have seen, as yet, no sign. So will the government now give government time to my bill to ensure this necessary change is put on the statute book as soon as possible?
Prime Minister.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, and she's absolutely right to campaign for punishments that fit the crime, and we're therefore bringing forward exactly those changes, Mr. Speaker, and in our forthcoming sentencing bill, and our proposals, I believe, will go as far, if not even further, than those that she wants, by raising the maximum penalty for causing death by careless driving when under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and they will tighten the law for those who cause serious injury by careless driving.
Now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
You're listening to Talk Radio. We're doing Prime Minister's questions for the first time in this studio with what we have behind us here, Keir Starmer talking to the Prime Minister for the first time today.
Embodied the spirit of Britain, and he will be sadly missed. And I welcome the initiative that the Prime Minister spoke of a clap this evening. Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are also with the family of Maureen Colquhoun, the first openly lesbian MP and a great champion of women's rights. Mr. Speaker, let me pay tribute to our NHS and all of those on the front line who are delivering the vaccine. Today we're likely to hit 10 million vaccinations, which is remarkable. The biggest risk to the vaccine programme at the moment is the arrival of new variants, such as the South African variant. On that issue, the government's own scientist, Sage, said 2 weeks ago, and I quote, "Only a complete preemptive closure of borders or the mandatory quarantine of all visitors upon arrival can get close to fully preventing new cases or new variants." So pretty clear. So why did the Prime Minister choose not to do the one thing that Sage said could prevent new variants coming to the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, Sage did not recommend a complete ban, and they say that travel bans should not be relied upon to stop importation of new variants. But we do have, Mr. Speaker, one of the toughest regimes in the world, and anybody coming from South Africa not only has to do a test before they come here, but anybody coming from South Africa now, British citizens returning from South Africa now, will find themselves obliged to go into quarantine for 10 days, and they will have an isolations assurance agency checking up on them, and it is illegal now, Mr. Speaker, to go on holiday in this country. It is illegal to travel from South Africa or all the countries on the current red list. And we will be going forward, Mr. Speaker, with a plan to ensure that people coming into this country from those red list countries immediately have to go into government-mandated quarantine hospitality.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm intrigued by the Prime Minister's answer. I don't think he disputes what Sage's view was, that only a complete closure or comprehensive quarantine of all arrivals will work. He doesn't seem to dispute that. He says it simply wasn't a recommendation. I would ask the Prime Minister to publish the full Sage minutes so that we can see what was said in full, or if there's some other advice, perhaps publish that. Because the situation is this: we know the South African variant is spreading across England and measures are in place to try to deal with that. We also know that other variants are out there in other parts of the world. So is the Prime Minister really saying, just as a matter of common sense, is he saying that quarantining all arrivals would make no difference to fighting new variants of the virus? Or is he saying that quarantining all arrivals at the border would make a difference, but it's too difficult to do it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the right honourable gentleman who only recently said that quarantine measures were a blunt instrument, and whose Shadow Transport Secretary said that quarantine should be lessened. We have one of the toughest regimes in the world, and I think when he calls for a complete closure of borders, or suggests that that might be an option, Mr. Speaker, he should be aware that 75% of our medicines come into this country from the European continent, 45% of our food. 250,000 businesses in this country rely on imports. It is not practical completely to close off this country, as he seems to be suggesting. What is practical to do is have one of the toughest regimes in the world and to get on with vaccinating the people of this country, which is what we are doing, Mr. Speaker.
Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, what he says about the Labour position is complete nonsense. He knows it. It's the 3rd of February 2021. We've new variants in the country, our schools are shut, and our borders are open. Everybody knows there are exceptions, whatever the quarantine regime. Everybody knows that. And that's not what this question is about. The position is this: 21,000 people are coming into this country every day. The Prime Minister's new border arrangements are still weeks away from being implemented and will only affect direct flights from some countries. We know from the first wave of the pandemic that only 0.1% of virus cases came from China, where we had restrictions, whereas 62% came indirectly from France and Spain, where there were no restrictions. Why does the Prime Minister think that the variants of the virus will behave differently and only arrive in the UK by direct flights?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he can't have it both ways. He simultaneously says that he wants the borders to be kept open for freight reasons or to allow businesses to carry on. I think that was what he was saying, whilst calling for tougher quarantine measures, which is exactly what this government imposed as soon as we became aware of the new variant, Mr. Speaker. And I repeat what you have to do if you want to come into this country from abroad. You have to 72 hours before you fly. You have to get a test, Mr. Speaker. You have to have a passenger locator form. You're kicked off the plane if you don't have it. You then have to spend 10 days, Mr. Speaker, in quarantine. If you come from one of the red list countries, Mr. Speaker, you have to go straight into quarantine. And all this, of course, is to allow us to get on with the vaccination programme. And if it had listened to the right honourable gentleman, Mr. Speaker, we would still be at the starting blocks, because he wanted to stay in the European Medicines Agency, Mr. Speaker, and said so 4 times from that dispatch box.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson talking there to Keir Starmer, who seems to have got his numbers a bit mixed up. He says we're going to hit 10 million vaccinations today. Actually, we hit them yesterday. So Captain Hindsight was never a better moniker for Mr. Keir Starmer, or Sir Keir Starmer, as he is now. Let's hear what his next question is.
The variant wouldn't be in the country, the single biggest threat to the vaccine system. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to another area where the government's been slow to act: the cladding crisis. This is affecting millions of people, and I can't tell the Prime Minister how anxious and angry people feel about this. It's now 3.5 years since the Grenfell tragedy, which took 72 lives. So can the Prime Minister tell the House and the country why, 3.5 years on, are there still hundreds of thousands of people living in homes with unsafe cladding, 3.5 years on, and why are millions of leaseholders in homes that they can't sell and facing extortionate costs?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in respect of the Honourable Gentleman's last answer, may I advise him to consult YouTube, where he will find an answer. He raises a very important point about cladding and the predicament of some leaseholders, of many leaseholders, and he's absolutely right, Mr. Speaker. This is a problem that needs to be fixed. This government is getting on with it. 95% of the high-rise buildings with unsafe ACM cladding have been work is either underway, they are either complete or underway to remove that cladding, Mr. Speaker. I very much appreciate and sympathise with the predicament of leaseholders who are in that situation, but we are working to clear the backlog, and I can tell him that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, and the Community Secretary will be coming forward with a full package to address the issue.
Mr. Speaker, whatever the Prime Minister claims being done isn't working, because this is the situation. through no fault of their own, huge numbers of people, especially leaseholders, are stuck in the middle. They are living in unsafe homes. They can't sell, and they're being asked to foot the bill. That's the situation that they are in. Take, for example, Will Martin. He's a doctor who's got a flat in Sheffield. He's been spending his days on the front line fighting COVID in the NHS. He spends his nights worrying about the £52,000 bill that he now has to pay for fire safety repairs. He doesn't want future promises, Prime Minister. He doesn't want to hear that it's all been sorted when he knows that it hasn't. He wants to know here and now, will he or will he not have to pay that £52,000 bill?
Mr. Speaker, we're determined that no leaseholder should have to pay for the unaffordable costs of fixing safety defects that they didn't cause under no fault of their own. And that's why, in addition to the 1.6 billion we're putting in to remove the ACM and the UPL cladding, we are also setting up and have set up a £1 billion building safety fund, which has already processed over almost 3,000 claims. And I sympathise very much with the gentleman Dr. Martin, that he mentions, and I hope very much that his particular case can be addressed in the course of the forthcoming package that will be produced by my right honourable friends.
Keir Starmer.
We're listening to Prime Minister's questions here at Talk Radio. Keir Starmer still banging on about all sorts of things that he thinks the government should be doing. Charlotte Ivers is here with me. We'll catch up with her very shortly and find out precisely what it is that Keir Starmer is trying to get at here. I don't think he's really making much of a landing of any punches, though, it has to be said. Let's go back to it.
This is what they want. Immediate upfront funding for unsafe blocks. A deadline of next year to make buildings safe and protection for leaseholders. We put those forward for a vote on Monday. The Prime Minister says he's determined to do something about it. What did he do? He ordered his MPs to abstain. If the Prime Minister is serious about moving this forward and ending this injustice, will he commit today to those simple asks from leaseholders?
Mr. Speaker, we're getting on with the job of helping leaseholders across the country by remediating their buildings. And in addition to the funds I've already mentioned, I can tell him that we're also introducing a £30 million fund to install alarms and other interim measures. And we're making it very clear to the mortgage industry that they should be supporting people living in such accommodation, and and making it clear to all sectors of the industry that people living in such homes should not be tied up in the whole EWS1 process. And that will benefit about 450,000 homeowners, Mr. Speaker. I think he's right to raise the problem, but we're getting on with addressing it, Mr. Speaker. And we're getting on with addressing the fundamental problem that afflicts this country, and that is the COVID pandemic. And that's why I'm pleased that we've now done 10 million first vaccinations across the country. And I repeat, Mr. Speaker, had we listened to the right honourable gentleman, we would be stuck at go, because he's shaking his head, but he can check the record. Several times he said that this country should remain in the European Medicines Agency. And if he wishes to on a point of order, to correct me, because he said it was wrong just now, I think he should study the record and he'll find that is exactly what he did. We want to get this country safe again. We want schools to come back. Mr. Speaker, he continues to refuse to say that schools aren't safe, Mr. Speaker. And on the contrary, he spends his time looking at Labour focus groups who tell him that he should stop sitting on the fence.
And Prime Minister,
Mr. Speaker,
no, Prime Minister, just in fairness, I think we've got to be somewhere near the question that was asked, and I don't want you to go around the world answering every problem and issue. There's a lot more questions who's going to allow you to do that, and the first one's coming, Marco LONGHI.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I join the Prime Minister with his...
Mr. Speaker, they're setting it straight for Boris Johnson. Charlotte Ivers is here. Welcome to our brand new studio, the new look that we have here. We've got the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer behind us. We've got the questioner standing up and talking as well. Interesting exchange that. People on Twitter are already pointing out that Keir Starmer doesn't seem to have mentioned the Article 16 situation, the Northern Irish situation, the EU situation from last Friday, which seems a bit of an omission, doesn't it?
It does. Having said that, I think Boris Johnson probably would have skated over it a bit if Keir Starmer had, because we know that an order has gone out from people in Downing Street to Conservative MPs not to try and make political capital out of this, not to use it as an opportunity to bash the EU. Their view is very much they want to rise above this and just focus on the really positive news about the UK vaccine programme.
Right. And of course, Keir Starmer tried at the beginning to attack him over this business of not bringing the quarantine in hotels in fast enough. Boris obviously not convinced that it's actually the way forward anyway, by the sounds of it. And then he moves on to the Grenfell cladding issue.
Indeed so. I think these are two quite good issues for Keir Starmer to go on, because they're really putting him on Conservative turf. He is the one calling for tougher restrictions at the border. Usually that would be very much Conservative territory. Labour, much more fans of free movement. Keir Starmer himself at one point a fan of free movement. So he's really put his tanks on the Conservative lawn there as well. Also standing up for leaseholders, homeowners. That's something, again, that has always been the Conservative Party's place, the party of home ownership since Thatcher. So I think a strong position there for Starmer to take. Not sure whether he necessarily hit home quite effectively enough.
No, I don't think so. And also this coming on the day that the Labour Party effectively kind of relaunched themselves in a way in The Guardian with this interesting kind of conversation about how they need to regain the red wall seats up in the north of England by basically attempting to be more patriotic and by wearing better suits.
Yes, the Labour Party are putting a lot of effort into winning back those seats, as you say. And one of the ways they think they can do it is by weaving patriotism in throughout all of their policies and making this a central part of the Labour Party. It has been part of the Labour Party at times in its history, but I understand a lot of their opinion polling is showing people really think that that has been lost now. So you'll see that with elements like being tougher on crime, tougher on border security. Also, you'll see it when Keir Starmer talks a lot about family, talks about the NHS as something that makes him proud to be British. This is a real attempt to claw back that narrative from the Conservatives.
Ian Blackford just asked a question. Let's see what Boris has to say to him.
Defeat the pandemic, and it was fantastic to talk to them, Mr. Speaker. And I would just repeat that the government remains, as I said yesterday, very willing to help Scotland with the rollout of vaccines across the whole of the UK.
Returning to Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
And there is the wow factor once again with the Prime Minister. What an absolute shambles that he's gone to a plant where there was a COVID outbreak and the Prime Minister can't just explain away this absolutely shocking error of judgment. Anyone can see that his campaign trip to Scotland was utterly, utterly reckless. The Daily Record story is very clear. The Prime Minister and his advisers knew there was a serious COVID outbreak at this plant. They knew the visit posed a risk. But they made a deliberate choice. They made the irresponsible choice. The Prime Minister put politics before public health. Prime Minister, why be so reckless? Is it any wonder that people in Scotland have no faith in this Prime Minister? Isn't he the worst possible leader at the worst possible time?
Mr. Speaker, I think what the people of Scotland want to see is the whole country pulling together and working to develop the vaccine, as that fantastic plant in Scotland is doing. One of the advantages of the Valneva vaccine is that it may be able to combat all sorts of variants in a very comprehensive way. It's amazing, wonderful to see Scottish scientists working to do that. I had a fantastic time. Nobody, by the way, raised that issue with me before or since, and it is my job, Mr. Speaker, to visit every part of this country. Nothing and no one, Mr. Speaker, is going to stop me, and I am very, very proud of the record of the government in rolling out the vaccine. As I say, the offer, it remains open to the Scottish Nationalist Party, where their National Party, if they insist, though they are also nationalists, Mr. Speaker, we're there to help the rollout of the vaccine if do more were they to decide that is necessary, Mr. Speaker.
Boris Johnson never missing an opportunity to call the Scottish Nationalist Party. He now corrects himself every time he does it, but he still does it every time. Sean Ivers is here. Ian Blackford making out that basically he was reckless in going to this factory up in Scotland when he went up there last Thursday. According to the Daily Record, there had been an outbreak of COVID-19, which had found about 14 coronavirus cases shortly before he got there. That hasn't made much track down here, has it?
It hasn't. It was 24 hours before the Prime Minister arrived. As you say, 14 coronavirus cases. That's 1 in 8 of the workforce.
Right.
Pretty remarkable. I do think, though, Ian Blackford just does not ask questions. It's Prime Minister's questions. I've written down the question he asked at the end of all of that, if you could call it that. Isn't he the worst possible leader at the worst possible time? What does
he's not very likely to agree with that, is he?
Exactly. Why doesn't he ask him a question that he doesn't know the answer to, really catch him out or something like that? I think he views it as a speech-making opportunity, which in a way is fair enough. It's the biggest audience he'll get all week. More people watch this than the rest of Parliament. But it's not really the point of the entire endeavour, is it?
No, and also it's been a pretty bad week for the SNP because they rolled out fewer vaccines, I think, than anything they'd done before earlier on this week, 9,000 in one day. Blackford has fired Joanna Cherry, one of the foremost minds of what most people think of the front bench of the SNP in Westminster. Nicola Sturgeon herself is facing this inquiry into the whole Alex Salmond affair, and so Blackford, you'd think, might want to just take a bit of a step back and keep himself out of the limelight.
It is a tricky week for the SNP, but at the same time, they do know, and speaking to people in the SNP, they really will say this behind closed doors, that Boris Johnson is one of the biggest assets they have when it comes to the independence vote. Pretty much every poll, if you ask people in Scotland who are wavering, who are considering voting for independence, who didn't before, the most popular answer will be, I don't think Boris Johnson is the type of person I want to see leading my country. So actually, when he popped up to Scotland last week, I spoke to some people in the SNP and they said, frankly, we're delighted. Bring him up and let people see him and that will persuade them more. So yes, Ian Blackford, bad week for him. But I think highlighting Boris Johnson's existence, probably always a good thing for him to do.
Indeed. Probably quite a good PMQs for Boris Johnson, though. Charlotte Ivers, thank you very much indeed. I hope you enjoyed the new format that we've got here because we are very much excited by the fact that we can see bigger and better things here at Talk Radio. This is, of course, the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, and we'll take some of your calls. We'll do some homeschooling, lots more to come. This is Talk Radio.